of. And so it becomes like a zombie movie, right? You get bit and you don't want to tell anyone because you don't want anyone to cast you out or maybe kill you on the spot. What is good, everyone? Welcome to the channel. My name is Paul and I make videos about Japanese society, life, and culture from the viewpoint of a long-term foreign resident. I've been here for going on 19 years now. And also welcome to a Japan that is currently boasting 70% humidity. We're coming out of the rainy season and the air is really, really heavy here. So you get to watch me literally sweat to make these videos. But today I'm going to be talking about a topic and getting into some of the real truths that you might discover if you were to have a Japanese wife. I'm going to be sharing anecdotes from myself and from friends, and the criteria for including an anecdote in this video is if it's one that's been corroborated by a number of different people and that it seems to be, while maybe not completely unique to Japan, something that seems to be relatively common amongst Japanese wives. Now, I'm not generalizing about Japanese women, I'm just generalizing about if you were to marry a Japanese woman and go on to like domestic partnership with them, live together, then you might see some of these things come out. So without further ado, let's get into it. The first odd quirk or trait that you might run into if you have a Japanese wife is probably one of the most irksome or annoying for those who have talked to me about it, and that is your wife might not feel sympathetic or comfort you when you're sick. Instead, she gets angry. That's right, catch a cold, angry. Catch corona, angry. Catch the influenza, angry. She's going to be pissed at you because you had the gall to get sick. Now, as I talk about these things today, I'm going to try to offer some sort of cultural explanation for some of these things. And honestly, this is one that got me at first too, because my wife is also like this. And when I think of like the women I know in the US anyways, I don't think it's a trait of most women in America to get angry at their significant other or their partner for being sick. But what I think is going on here in Japan is that it fits into the causing trouble for other people avoidance, which is so important in this country, basically known as meiwaku. You don't want to cause meiwaku or cause trouble or problems for other people. And when you're sick, oh well, instead of being sympathetic, you're going to receive this attitude of you're causing me trouble because I'm going to have to do extra housework, or I'm going to have to pick up the kids, or whatever it might be. So yeah, if you marry a Japanese woman, you might find that getting sick becomes something that you're actually afraid of. And so it becomes like a zombie movie, right? You get bit and you don't want to tell anyone because you don't want anyone to cast you out or maybe kill you on the spot. When I find myself getting sick, I find myself trying to hide it. Now, I just want to reiterate that not everything on this list applies to all Japanese wives, and not everything on this list applies to my wife either. But again, enough people that I talk to amongst friends and acquaintances, foreign guys who have Japanese wives, basically corroborated that these things are a deal in their household. Before I get on to the next part, I just want to say quickly that I am releasing, for the first time in several months, a new episode of the Journal of Japan Journeys. That's my podcast where I talk about the stories of foreigners in Japan as to why they came to Japan and why they've ended up staying for so long. And this next episode is going to be a man who came from Taiwan originally. He is a designer and artist. And if you're interested in hearing his story, please look for that Journal of Japan Journeys podcast episode to drop soon in the next week or two. All right, let's get back to the video. So the second one, while gender roles have tended to shift and change and become less pronounced in many Western countries, in Japan, there still are a lot of more defined gender roles. And as such, as a foreign husband in Japan, you might find your Japanese wife put certain things onto you that she sees as the man's role in the family. And while many of these things are not of particular issue, the one that can get tiresome or bothersome is when it's a task that would be much better for someone for whom their first language is Japanese. There have been many times when my wife has been like, you need to talk to this customer service representative, or you need to go to the insurance company and figure out what's going on with this policy, etc., etc. There have been times when it's dealing with some really complicated issue, and I'm sitting there thinking, this might have taken 10 minutes if I was a native speaker of Japanese, but apparently it's my job to take care of it, so there it is. So yeah, you might find yourself thrust into roles that you feel vastly underqualified for just because you don't speak Japanese as well as your wife, but because it's the man's role to take care of this particular thing, you might end up doing it anyways. And speaking of roles, well, there is a general expectation amongst Japanese women that if they have a foreign husband, they will get more help with the housework, and I think that's generally the case. But even so, there is an attitude that there are certain things that the husband is not to be allowed to do. And it seems to vary from wife to wife. For example, I have a friend who told me that with his wife, he's absolutely not allowed to hang the laundry because his wife has such a specific system that he would almost certainly get it wrong. And when he offered to learn the system, she's like, no, I'm not going to take the trouble to teach you. I'm just going to do the laundry hanging. Okay. In the case of my wife, she has obsessive compulsive disorder over the cleanliness of toilets. I can clean everything else in the house, the bathtub, the shower room, all of the laundry, the dishes, the kitchen, whatever else. I can do all of it, but I'm not allowed to touch the toilets because she just assumes that it will not be up to her incredibly spick and span standard, I guess. So I'm not allowed to do any sort of toilet cleaning whatsoever. A third friend talked to me saying that he actually had to fight with his wife for her to allow him to do some household chores because she wasn't going to allow him to do anything in the house. And he was like, that's not the balanced relationship that he wanted to have in his life. So he's like, you got to give me household duties to do as well. Now, for some of you watching this video, this might sound like a dream come true, but for long-term stability with a spouse, I don't recommend just giving all of the housework over to your partner because even if that's what they claim to want, I doubt that'll sit well in the long run. And while we're on the topic of housework, we should touch on the fact that so often housework is done at a much more frequent rate in Japan, at least compared to where I come from in the States. I realize that might involve regional differences, but in Japan, vacuuming every day. Laundry every day. Those sorts of things, I remember growing up, my mother would do laundry every other day and vacuum 2 or 3 times a week kind of thing. It might be the fact that Japanese houses are smaller, so you can kind of get away with that. And the laundry thing makes total sense because most people don't have dryers in Japan. So you do have to hang your laundry out to dry. So you have to take advantage of good weather. And also it takes longer for things to dry. So you can't just let a bunch of things sit for a long time without washing them because then you're going to be in trouble trying to get them dry enough to use. And drying space is at a premium. So both of those things make sense to a point. But even if you're living in America with a Japanese spouse, they're probably going to still insist on a daily vacuuming and daily laundering, even if you have a drying machine. You can tell how long I've been away from the States that I called it a drying machine rather than a dryer. Now, this fastidiousness for cleanliness extends beyond just household chores and also to food safety. And this is one, again, this is not really so true for my wife, but it's one that came up again and again, that there are a lot of Japanese wives who are really strict about food expiration dates and have this idea that something can only be in the refrigerator for 2 days before it needs to be tossed. I don't know about you, but growing up, if something was in the refrigerator, like a salad or a leftover meat dish or something, you probably had 3 or 4 days from which you could still pull it out and microwave it and eat it and it'd be just fine. But there seems to be a much stronger sense, and maybe that's the Japanese culture of just food freshness in general. Maybe. I'm not sure if it's because of that higher sense of cuisine, because cuisine is definitely way better in Japan than America in terms of sensibility to fresh ingredients, etc. That might be what's going on, but a lot of wives apparently will toss things just really early, and that irks some of the foreign husbands that I know. In fact, I was talking to a coworker who makes his own, basically this spicy chili bean concoction every week that he brings to work, and he eats it for lunch. He makes a giant pot of it and he eats part of it every day for 5 days. And apparently that was a big fight with his wife in the beginning, because she's like, by the third day it's already bad, and if you're eating it on the fourth day and the fifth day you're gonna get sick, and that's meiwaku, and then I'll be angry at you kind of thing. So eventually he won out and proved that he wasn't getting sick every week from eating this. But that apparently is a thing with Japanese wives, that you should expect that if you have some kind of leftover you really want to eat that's in the fridge, you better get to it quick before she tosses it out. And finally, one final trait that I'm going to guess is maybe not just Japanese wives, but will be Japanese husbands as well. But it's kind of a having your cake and eating it too situation, where this was mentioned again and again and again, that if the couple is in Japan, then the attitude is, this is Japan, you have to do it this way, the Japanese way. And if the couple is in America or in Canada or somewhere else, it becomes, well, I'm Japanese, so I'm going to be doing it the Japanese way, and I'm not going to do it the American or Canadian or French or British way. So do it the Japanese way in Japan, and I'm Japanese wherever I am, so I'm doing it the Japanese way. Have your cake and eat it too. That seems to be a very common theme that I saw again and again. So something to be aware of and be forewarned about if you decide to marry a Japanese woman, or Japanese man for that matter. So what do you think? It's not a particularly exhaustive list, because I weeded out a whole bunch of answers where only one, maybe two people said it, or the answer seemed like, well, I can imagine American wives being that way, etc. And maybe you disagree with some of the things I have on the list. Maybe you're in America right now and you're like, oh yeah, my wife does all of those things. Let us know in the comments if you agree or disagree. But for me, certainly the surprising one has always been the being angry at you if you're sick. That's the one that and especially because it's not just aimed at me, it's aimed at my kid too. So if my kid comes home from school with a cold, it's like, well, kids are germ factories. Kids get colds all the time. And getting angry at a child because they've gotten sick, they didn't want to get sick. They didn't choose to get sick. So it's one of those things that I don't really get. But it is, unfortunately, a thing that you might run into if you have a Japanese spouse. So just be aware of that. Anyway, let us know in the comments what you think of this list. And as always, I want to thank you very much for watching this particular video. I will catch you next week, where I'm going to be talking about a particularly sticky, difficult problem in Japan and my thoughts about it. Namely, the falling birth rate, the hyper-urbanization, the dying countryside. We're going to get into some deep stuff next week, so if you're interested in that topic, please tune in. Thanks for watching this video though, and I'll catch you next time. Peace.